this is Dominic, wedding DJ.
And this is Serena, wedding planner.
And together we are the Wedding Duo. We are here to talk all things weddings.
Planning a wedding can be stressful, but we are here to help.
So before you say, that's it, we're going to Vegas, don't go to Vegas.
Let's have some fun.
Join us as we answer your wedding questions and help navigate planning one of the biggest days of your life with the Wedding Duo. Hello, everyone out there in podcast listening land. We're back for another episode.
And we're excited to be here. We're also excited because engagement season is upon us. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Some people are like, now that wedding season's done, I'm like, is it? Because we still have a lot of weddings all the way through Thanksgiving, and then we are busy again, and then Christmas. And then January slows down a little bit. But yeah, we're definitely into the season with people started looking for rings.
They do. And there's a lot of engagements that happen over the holidays. Actually, they say between Thanksgiving and I think Valentine's Day is the most popular time to get engaged. And that's also when we do a lot of our bookings for the following year.
Let's take a trip down memory lane. For those of you out there that are engaged, do you remember when you're like, oh my God, I think you got a ring. I think he's going to ask me. Is that a, huh?
That's so exciting.
How about those memories? Or we may have somebody who's listening that's like, I think I'm listening to your podcast because I think he's ready to pop the question.
Ooh. Are
you there? Is that moment? Do y'all remember that moment?
Yes.
Good
Or
times. Good times.
Maybe you found the ring in the sock drawer and you pretended like you didn't know it was going to happen.
Should we tell them when I asked you?
Let's do it.
Okay. So there we were in the living room in the house that we already owned with the two children we already had.
Mm-hmm.
And because for those of you that don't know, we were both married before, swing and a miss, take two. So we were together with children already, living together, had our whole life, but we weren't officially married.
True.
So I gave the phone to our eldest who was in a diaper, 3. And the baby,
I don't know. She wasn't in a diaper, but
she was in a diaper. I remember the video. She was in a diaper. And the little one. So the littlest one had a binky in his mouth. And I'm like,
what is a binky? A binky is a pacifier.
a nun that they used to call it up in the French Canadian areas of the world. So I took a knee and I go, here, Lily, take this video. We're going to do a video. And I gave it to her and she shot a pretty good video for as little as she was.
She did.
She's holding the camera, my phone. And I popped the binky out of my son's mouth. And I go, here you go. And I was on a knee and I said, close your eyes. And I put the binky on her finger and I'm like, look. And you were like, oh, look, it's so pretty.
And I was so disappointed because I thought he was joking.
I was joking.
Okay.
And the whole time our middle child, because we didn't have a third child at the time, he was like, no, binky. He wanted his binky back. And I go, hold on, buddy. So then I go, wait, Lily, did you get it? And then I said, close your eyes. I put the binky back in his mouth and I took out the actual ring. Mm-hmm. I go, try it again. 3, 2, 1. Hey, will you marry me? And then she's like, ugh. Yes. There was the shiny ring.
There was the face of shock. And
there it is.
There.
For those of you watching on YouTube,
it's lovely.
It looks little. It's not too tiny. I was impressed for us. We had like no money.
We did. We were po.
We were po.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's our story of engagement.
Sorry, I figured we'd go down that little road.
Absolutely. But I think we should do some sort of thing on engagements. This is making my brain tick. It
is part of it. We usually talk about the wedding, the actual day of, but there's a lot before you even get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but today's topic, let's get to today's topic.
Yeah, we're 20 minutes into this thing. Is that what we're talking about
20 minutes. So we did a couple weeks ago, I did some stories asking for questions from you guys that you'd like us to talk about on the podcast. And we picked 5 of them and we are going to discuss those questions today.
Very good questions, actually.
Really good, because it really helps us to know what the engaged couples and the moms of brides and, everybody out there that's in on the wedding planning would like to hear about. It helps us to then have topics to discuss.
And even if it's, we kind of hit the outside, the parameters of what you're looking at, and you're like, they didn't quite answer the question. At least some of the stuff to go to your planner or to your photographer or your DJ with some questions like, so is this a thing? And they can say it's a thing, but maybe not in your scenario because everybody's venue is different. Everybody's vision is different. Everyone's budget is different. So it really is still a very personal thing, decisions you're going to have to make for yourselves. But at least this is kind of helps maybe guide, steer you in the right direction, whatever. That's our goal.
True. So I'm going to get my phone and I'm going to look. at
This
the
is just an
first.
excuse for her to be on her phone, even while we podcast.
Oh, stop it.
Seriously?
So our first question is basically she's saying, I think, backyard weddings. So
Ooh, backyard
to talk about
weddings.
backyard weddings. So let's start there. And we'll give a few tips on maybe deciding whether that works for you or not.
So I think when people hear backyard weddings, they think, well, it's a DIY wall to wall. But some people have really nice backyards.
True.
I have been involved in backyard weddings that had all the professionals there, all the big hitters in town were there. It was just a beautiful backyard. And they were like, we saved a lot of money by doing it on our property if you have the property and the space.
But do you? But do you save that much? Okay. Because my question is.
No, I'm just saying, obviously renting a venue is an expensive
right
thing. That's one of the big expenses. But you there's still a lot of stuff that the venue provides is what you're going for that you don't get for your backyard. So ready, go. You do that part.
Yeah. So that's kind of where you have to weigh and balance this decision for your budget, right? Because if you have space, and even if it's beautiful space, it still doesn't have a lot of the things you need in order to throw a party, to have an event, to have a wedding. So you are going to want to have, tables and chairs, possibly tenting. You got to worry about electricity and lighting.
The power. That's a big one because there's people, some venues need a lot of power.
Right. And your vendors need power. So if you bring in a DJ or a food truck or even a catering truck, they need power and they need access a lot of times to water. So, it really is a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more planning involved. So then you have to ask yourself, well, then do I need to get, a professional planner or someone to facilitate all these pieces? So the outside costs are often more. I don't know that they equate to the cost of the venue. It would depend.
Yeah, it depends on the venue, right?
But there's just a lot of pieces that you then have to bring in.
And if you did DIY, there have been times where I've showed up as a professional DJ and I'm like, looks to me like I'm the only professional here that does this for a living because Aunt Betty's the planner. The cousins are doing the barbecue. Uncle Charlie's taking pictures. It's like, oh, it's just, I'm the only one here. And we're kind of like, okay. And it's really DIY and it's really
simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's still your wedding day. It's still an important day. Not to say take anything away from it, but it's just like we always say, we're trying to help people navigate between your vision and your budget. And that's kind of the parameter you try to walk that line. Right. But it's, if you were to hire professionals, like for catering, for example, when I've done these big weddings at somebody's brilliant backyard, the caterers take over the kitchen.
Yes.
So if you think, oh, we're going to do it all in the backyard, your caterers are not going to be in the backyard. They're probably going to be in the kitchen. They're going to be all over the entry. They're going to set up tables. It's like they take over a room in your house oftentimes as well, right?
Well, unless they have a truck that they use.
They may have a truck.
Yeah. So that's a question you're going to want to ask. And
the last one I did, they did not. They rolled in they were like, the kitchen was their kitchen now. It was their, it was like their back room.
So you've got to be willing to allow them to use that space because they do need the space. It's raining.
It's like, what was that noise?
All of a sudden.
Started raining here.
So that is definitely the biggest tip we can give you about backyard weddings, about, property weddings is just consider all the parts, all the pieces that go into an event that you won't have because you're not at an actual venue.
We're going to have to do a whole podcast just on backyard weddings.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing. And like I said, if it's just trying to save money or if you just...
That's what you vision.
Your papa mowed the back 40 and we're going to go up on the hill and do it there. But another thing to think about is the dance floor. Like, I know we're getting in the weeds now, but are people going to dance on the grass? Are you going to bring in a dance floor? It has to be level. There's that access. People might need to be back in their trucks or their vehicles. Can they get there? And then lastly, your neighbors. If there's neighbors, you can't blast your music till 2 a.m. because the cops will be there.
Yeah. And there's noise ordinances. They will shut you down.
You know what I always say? If it's like, even if you have property where people aren't right next door, I sometimes ask, where's your nearest neighbor or where's that neighbor that's going to call the complaint, right? And I can orient my speakers a different direction. Just pointing your speakers a different direction can really help.
Yeah.
Because your music, if you're out in the hill country or out in the wilderness, your music will carry, especially your bass. And all they'll hear a mile away is just, and here come the cops.
Yep.
Here come the cops. And now your wedding shut down. Are we going on to the next one? Is that where you grabbed your phone?
Yep. Ready for number 2.
I'm telling you, that backyard weddings, we got to do a podcast on that.
Yes, I agree. Is it odd to not have a bridal party? Okay, so this is a great question.
What's the short answer?
I don't think it's even the short answer. It is the answer is no.
No.
We do weddings all the time that don't have bridal parties, or they have the bridal party sit down. It's just the couple up there. There's just so many variations on what works for you. Or maybe you just have a best man and a maid of honor, or maybe you just have the kids.
We did the
as
funniest
part of the
TikTok
wedding
on this one. Remember, like, what does it mean if you have 2 people? What does it mean if you have 20 people? Because it's hard. If you met in college and you were both in a fraternity and a sorority, and you're like, what about Susan? Now we got to bring Susan, and then you've got Bob. And I'm like, and you're like, you know what? Rather than have 25 people on each side, we're going to go down to just your ride or die, like just one or none. Or what if you have siblings? What if you have kids? This is a lot, right? And
Absolutely.
So some people say, I just want you up there, just you and me.
It's true. And that is
and
sometimes
there's nothing wrong with that.
Really special and very intimate to just have the couple up there. So there is no right or wrong. And those are just, some choices that you have to make based on your situation with your friends and your family, right?
And you know what else? And this is a random thought. I've got a wedding coming up where the mother of the bride is also the matron of honor, because they're like besties. And I've had the dad be the best man for the groom before, which is awesome.
Sweet.
That's awesome. I know it's kind of a weird thing because you're already the father of the groom, but they were like buds and pals, and I was like his go-to guy. And so
he said, why not? Let's have him be best man as well. So I love that. And that's going to take us into another question, which is kind of similar. We have it here. Do we need to, or how do you match the bridesmaids to the groomsmen? Basically saying, do you have to have an even number? What if you can't decide and you really have, maybe you have 4 sisters, right? But he only has 3 really good friends, then you're lopsided. And the same thing goes for what we were just talking about. There are no rules. So there's definitely ways, because I think people sometimes picture in their heads, like as the procession happens, meaning as people are walking down the aisle, that they have to be paired up. So then you have to have equal, right?
It's a very freeing moment when you say, no, you don't, they don't have to walk down together. And they're like, they don't. Oh, and then suddenly it's just like, oh, and all that. Because everything is a stress point, right? Everything's like, how do we do this? How do we do that? It's not fitting. I'm trying to put this round peg in this square hole and it's not working.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've had brides get kind of hung up on and worry about is, how does it look in photos if it's not even? And so if that's a concern of yours, a solution for that may be, what I've had another couple do is they had, an uneven amount of bridesmaids and groomsmen, and 2 of them were her cousins, and they processed, but they went and sat down. So they actually only had 2 and 2, 2 and 2 up there, but actually 4 girls processed and only 2 gentlemen processed.
And if you have like 7 and 5, let's say, for whatever gender is on either side, it doesn't look weird. It's like a photographer can come in close enough so that they only see the best man, maid of honor, maybe one other person on either side. And from the sides, they can't really tell. Now, if you have 20 girls and 2 guys, that might look a bit odd, but I've never seen that. Usually they have either a lot or a few, but it's really common to have it offset.
And then when you do the processional, when you have everyone walk down the aisle, something you can do is have them go single file. So they don't have to pair up to go down the aisle. They can also, when you're going into the reception, like for introductions, you don't have to do pairs there either. You can do bridesmaids introduced, single, and then groomsmen introduced.
And not even single, just having, ladies and gentlemen, the bridesmaids. You can do it that way. Stephanie and Jennifer and Corinne, and then they all come in like a big pack. I think it's a pack of bridesmaids and a gaggle of groomsmen.
Is that the proper?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
But yeah, one of my favorite ways to see people go down the aisle is have the groom go down with maybe the officiant shoulder to shoulder, and then all the groomsmen just 2 steps behind, like ducks in a row. The groom walks down, does an about face, gives the bro hug to all the guys, and they have a different song, right? They have some song that fits them, not necessarily even them, just a different song. They all go down there because they were all just told, right? What were they told?
Just to wear the same suit.
I was told to wear this. That's what everyone else is wearing. We're just matching. The bridesmaids, however, 4 hours of hair and makeup, every hairstyle, every dress, every shoe, every floor, everything was picked out meticulously. They're like, all eyes on me. So the bridesmaids can come out one at a time and walk down.
Yeah, it works really well.
Really well.
Especially for an uneven group.
And it's very elegant.
I like it too. So our uneven bridesmaids, groomsmen, we checked that one. Next one is the best food choices we've seen. Well, I think we're going to focus a little bit.
That's a vast question.
I was going to say exactly that it depends very much on your taste in food, right? So we could say we love a certain cuisine, but you may hate it. What I'm going to focus on a little bit more is what makes for a good experience for your meal, right? So the thing to consider is choosing a catering staff, a catering company that services events, right? Especially if you have a large guest count. If you have a smaller guest count, you can sometimes get away with maybe a restaurant caterer or food trucks, that kind of a thing. But if you've got 100 people or more, you're definitely going to want to consider the speed of service that they're able to provide, the amount of staff. It just changes things drastically if the catering company is not able to service your guest count in a timely manner.
And it's really, but it's also like, what's your vision? Like we talked about, if you just have everybody in town, you're not going to have a big dance party. You're just there for a meal. Then there's no pressure to get everyone fed and get on to the next event. But most of the weddings that we're involved in, there's like a 6-hour window from walking down the aisle to thank you, good night. And most timelines have an hour, maybe a little bit more for food. And if you have a restaurant that picked up their production and moved it somewhere, which is what they don't usually do, most restaurants are not used to having 150 people walk in to the restaurant and everyone wants to eat in an hour and then be done. That's not how a restaurant works, right? But that's exactly what a caterer does, a wedding caterer or a full-scale catering service. That's exactly what they do. And they're dialed into it. They're staffed to do it. They know how to do it. It's a well-oiled machine.
Yes. And the other thing that comes with an event caterer is the bussing of the tables. And I know this might not matter to y'all that much, but it matters to me as a planner because it is very helpful to have staff there that is paying attention to the dirty plates and the glassware, because your guests will get uncomfortable with that stuff on the tables. It'll show up in pictures. You just don't want that around. And so a lot of your venues, like your professional venues, actually require certain caterers to be brought in. And one of the things they also require is that they stay till the end of the event to clean up, to take the trash. So I know this didn't really answer the question of our best food choices, but it does in the sense that we would choose a professional catering company and they do tastings. So that's the other thing. One of the great things about being engaged and going through the process of planning your wedding is you get to go on tastings. So go check the food out, right? Make that decision.
If there's any grooms listening, you're going to want to go on this. This is one of the things you're going to have to go on. The cake tasting and the catering tasting. Go and try it out. And of course, like we mentioned before, your budget, right? That's a huge thing, is your food, right? And chicken's usually less expensive than beef or whatever. Like your guest count is a major thing, but is it buffet versus plated? That's another factor for sure. But it's really, and I would say in the other part of your vision, some people are we're not, I don't care. They can have peanut butter and jelly. I want to hit the dance floor. We're dancers. My families want to dance. They want to have a good time. That's what people are going to remember. Other people are oh no, we're foodies. We want to sit down. We want all the 3-course meal with a served dessert. I mean, if that's your thing, then go there. But that's where it's hard, where you'll see somebody say here's where your budget should be split up to. And you're no, that doesn't fit for everybody. It's a good starting point, but do you do what works for the two of you?
Absolutely.
Can I tell one more story?
I don't think I can say no.
So there I was it's not in Napa, but there's a CIA in Napa. CIA is the Culinary Institute of America. There's only 4 or 5 around the country. There's one here in San Antonio.
There is one here.
But the one in Napa, and again, it's not in Napa. It's just past Napa. And I can't remember the name of the town. St. Helena, maybe? I don't remember. But it looks like a castle. And you go in there, they have this wine room with these giant wine barrels. It was acoustically, it was a bit of a nightmare, but it was a really cool room. But it's the Culinary Institute, right? They had great meals there. And at one point I saw people bringing out the food and it was surf and turf, right? Steak and a lobster tail. I'm like, what? Who is it? And I'm thinking, oh, that usually means the caterers get a little Tupperware thing with a burger.
You mean the vendors? You said caterers.
No, I mean, usually the vendors, that means I'm going to get I'm getting a Tupperware with a burger, which is fine, or sandwich, a BLT or
a vendor meal, they call it.
A vendor meal, because sometimes, I had no expectations to get.
Right.
But they did. They said, where would you like your meal? And I go, am I getting what they're getting? I'm like, oh yeah, let me just take a minute. And you know, they have like, they basically teach people to be chefs. And they had that room where it was like a really steep room where there were TVs and there was like a cooking place down at the bottom, like you're in a cafeteria, not a cafeteria, in a classroom, but it was like a culinary classroom
where they would shoot.
Yeah, where they would like teach the class and everybody's sitting up there. And I sat on the very top. There's nobody in there. I'm sat at the top like,
with your lobster.
With my lobster tail. And that memory is stuck with me so long because I'm like, let me just take a minute. Because usually I tell people, that's the only military training I still use. Because at basic training, they used to tell us, eat it now and taste it later, right? Because you have to scarf it down because I got to eat back in the room because I have music playing. I took a little more time.
You did.
To enjoy. I'd shoot
savor.
every bite. I'm like, lobster tail? What?
Yes, that's amazing.
I felt fancy.
You
it was
should.
Extra.
Oh my gosh. That's
anyway,
funny.
there's a side story. What's the next question?
Our next question, my phone decided to lock up. All right. So our next question is going to be about destination weddings, maybe some of our tips for destination weddings. Okay. So this is a great question. And a lot of you may be at the very beginning of your wedding planning journey and deciding like, do we want to have an event locally or do we want to go to a destination and have the event there? And so some things to consider for that are, it is more challenging, not impossible, but more challenging to plan a destination event from far away, unless you hire someone who's in the location to help you. And the other thing that might work is, are you, for example, living in Chicago, but your family's all in Texas, so you're going to have the wedding in Texas, but you've got your mom here, you've got your sisters here, they can go take photos, they can talk to your florist and get pictures.
Happens all the time. We're at an open house or a wedding fair, and I'm like, oh, who's the bride? They go, she's in Alaska. I'm like, oh, like, but she's coming down for the thing. We're here. We're like her scouts. We're out here finding the vendors, whatever. And it can be done for sure.
The one time I think it works is if you're going to go somewhere, let's say tropical, right? And there's an all-inclusive wedding resort space, because they will pull all those pieces in, but that is not cheap.
They do it. That's what they do. Like that's a destination wedding spot.
And everything is provided basically for you, with the expectation that you and whoever's coming along just show up. And you do make some decisions.
That's a lot. I mean, I would read every review I could find.
It's true. It's true.
I think one of the reasons people do destination weddings is because their cousin had a wedding and they brought 350 people. And you're like, that's just not me.
Right.
They're like, and rather than spend 50 grand there, you can sure get one hell of a vacation for that. Right. And so it's just like, let's just go somewhere, bring our ride or dies and our parents. Yep. And sometimes they're like, oh, we're doing a destination just because we don't want 350 people like that, right? So, because that's the thing. Not everybody wants the same thing. And if that's how your families do it, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be paying my wedding off at our 20th wedding anniversary, right? Like, it's a thing. It can be very expensive. So I'm not, all the vendors out there are like, shut up, Dominic.
No, because
but it's a thing. It's a different direction. And if that's it can be beautiful. I mean, I don't know, man. Absolutely. I would have a hard time. You and I, like, what do we do? Go to the beach somewhere, right? And just have that kind of a wedding. It's like a wedding honeymoon rolled into one, huh?
It's true. But expect to have someone on the ground there for you, helping to facilitate it, whether that be the venue and they have it provided, or you have family and friends, like I mentioned. That's so helpful. It will reduce a lot of your stress than trying to, FaceTime the florist and the caterer and figure that out. And then maybe it doesn't meet your expectation when you arrive, but what can you do at that point? Right. So, those are just some things to consider if you're at that stage trying to make that decision.
And one other thing, like, we've been asked a lot to travel now. And if somebody's going to Cabo, if it's over a international border, you may have trouble with your vendors that you found in the States. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to have a work visa. I know some people can slip in with their camera as a carry-on and just say, oh, I'm just vacationing. Right. But if I'm bringing all my stuff in, they're going to be looking at going, what exactly are you doing to all these microphones and this soundboard? I'm like, oh, my cousin's getting married. And I mean, I know people have done it, but it's like, it depends. I mean, that's something else to maybe ask the people on the other end.
Absolutely. So our last, number 5, right, is a big one. So number 5 is about the ceremony, and it's kind of broken up into a few different pieces: ceremony expectations, the duration, Bible readings. Does it have to be a serious thing, or can there be jokes? And I love this question because I think it weighs heavily on a lot of couples' minds, like what's appropriate. Maybe they're not religious and they don't know how to create the ceremony that they have in their heads, right?
Well, plus, it's the beginning. That's like usually where it all starts.
Yes.
Especially if you're doing it all in one spot. If you're in the church, then you'll kind of uproot and kind of go to the reception. But if you're doing ceremony reception in the same spot, the ceremony almost always is the beginning. So everybody is super puckered up. It's really a small percentage of the day.
Sure.
But it is a very high stress part of the day. Because after the ceremony, everybody kind of just goes, ugh. And even the most A-type brides that have been in the weeds, I'm just like, so what do you want to do here? And they're like, I don't care. I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
Stay in that headspace.
They got through the ceremony.
You're there. Yeah. And at that point, nothing else can really be changed. So
right. So to talk about one of the question pieces, the duration. So most ceremonies, when I do a timeline for a ceremony that's not in a church, I will put 30 minutes on the timeline for that. And the reason is that not that the ceremonies usually even last that long, but there's a little wiggle room there for maybe we start instead of at 3, we start at 3:05. And then the ceremony takes 20 minutes. Well, then we're at 3:25. And then we've got that extra 5 minutes to get people moved to cocktail hour and get everybody who needs to stay for photos in place. There we are. We got our half hour, right? That's a very normal ceremony that takes place not in the church. Now, if you're in a church and you have a mass, that is all going to be dictated by the church, right?
Well,
they're going to be
mass. They may not be Catholic, but you might have a whole full ceremony.
Sure. They're going to be, have their timeline and their parameters for not only when you can have the ceremony, but how long it's going to last. Okay.
For all the non-Catholics that went to the church and they're like, this is really long.
Yeah. They're an hour or more. Yeah. So that's a factor for you when you're, deciding up front when to start your event, when to start the ceremony. If you're going to have your ceremony in a church, and I know I mentioned this previously, check with the church before you make a decision on timing, because they may only allow certain start times on Saturdays. If, for example, if you're getting married on a Saturday.
Can I say something funny too? This is going to be funny.
Is it?
This is before I was still single. I brought a girlfriend to a cousin's wedding and it was in the church. It was Catholic and I was raised Catholic. She had never been to a Catholic mass before.
Oh,
she said, it's kind of like Simon Says. That's what she said. Because it's like, kneel down. Simon says, kneel. Jesus says, kneel. Jesus says, stand. Jesus says, sit. And I was like, and I was trying not to giggle out loud when she said that. I go,
gosh.
It is a little bit like Jesus says. Simon
yes, that's true. For all of you who are Catholic or have been to a Catholic ceremony.
You watch this weekend, the Catholic services are all going to be like, why is it so crowded? Like everybody came in to see what it was like.
Simon says. Oh, because that many people listen to our podcast. They're all going to
be like this international event that's going to happen this Sunday.
Okay, back on track.
Like, is it Easter? It's not Easter.
So let's talk about readings. Okay. So if you are religious, or even if you're not, and you want some more substance for your ceremony, readings or having someone get up and sing or anything that you have seen, at a ceremony previously, we've seen and works really well, right?
Most people do Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. I can probably recite that if they wanted a Bible reading. That one's very appropriate. It just talks about love. And it's great. There's other ones in the Bible that are, I don't know, the one where they talk about the man is the boss and the woman has to submit. And I'm like, yeah, there's that one. But anyway. But if you're not religious and you want something else in there, the one that I always suggest is there's a really sweet poem called The Hand Poem. The Hand Poem. And it just says, and people sometimes don't even say, they did it this past weekend. And they don't always say like, and now I'm going to read the hand poem. They just say, turn to each other, hold each other's hand. And they kind of go into it and they say, these are the hands that you're going to be holding your babies one day. Even when they're old and gray, they're still going to reach from you. They're going to wipe tears away when you're sad. I mean, it's fantastic. Really it really is like no better time than at the altar to have this poem read, right? And it really fits the moment. But to her point about the substance, there's ones I've had weddings that have been like literally, it's like time, that's a record. That was 3 minutes from the time they got up there. I do, he does, she does, here's a ring, there's a ring, man and wife. And I'm like, holy cow, there was like, I mean, it was almost like too fast. The photographer's like, I barely got any shots, right? And so I don't want to say you don't want that, but I feel like you don't want that. That's like really fast. I know you might be getting nervous, and it doesn't need to be much. We've done a 10-minute ceremony.
Right.
But if you want more, like she said, bring in a singing, bring in a reader, bring in a song, and have somebody sing. Have somebody read a poem. I've had people read Dr. Seuss of all things.
Yeah.
Have more of a procession, like do more. Like I've done loads of TikToks about how don't like rush to the altar, like pause at the back of the aisle once you make your reveal if you're walking with your dad or whatever, and just like make the ceremony more substance outside of just the two of you standing up there.
Exactly. And that's true. And we'll end this by talking about one of our favorite things to talk about the ceremony is add humor, right? A lot of times,
we like humor.
Yes. And a lot of times, as he mentioned, people get really stressed out and really puckered up for the ceremony. And humor can be a really great way to kind of hit that release button and have everyone giggle, laugh a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way we've seen this done is maybe you are doing personal vows and you bring them into the vows, or if you're not comfortable doing that, your officiate, a lot of times, if you can ask them, tell them a story about how you met, tell them about your engagement, and ask them to bring that into the ceremony somehow.
And from my perspective, oftentimes people say like, oh, we don't need the DJ at the ceremony because we have a string quartet or we have a harpist or whatever. But what they don't usually bring is microphones. And if you have 150 people and it's an outdoor ceremony, if you've been a guest at one of these, some of the people out there, I know where he's going with this. You're in the third row and they're up there talking and you're like, I can't hear anything. Like, just smile and nod. Because people generally like the live musicians won't bring amplification, maybe for their instruments, but not for the people doing the ceremony.
Right.
So that's one thing like a DJ sometimes will bring, oftentimes we do, is a lapel mic for the officiant. And I sometimes put one on the groom too, because that's what people like to hear, right?
You've already said this in previous podcasts.
I'm saying it again. It's when the groom starts to go like, oh, the groom's crying. Turn it up to 11. That's what I always say.
That is what he always says. So yes, we are advocates for humor. We are advocates for bringing in personal stories. It's really special. It really creates a very unique, very you ceremony. So I love that question. Mm-hmm. So something I'm going to mention real quick are some additional resources that you guys can find from us. So we are redesigning our website. And by the time this podcast is out, it probably will already be live. So we've got some really great resources for if you're a vendor, if you're a couple getting married, and also if you're a brand that would like to work with us. So specifically couples out there that are engaged, if you would like more help, if you're looking for some guidance on planning your big day and you don't have a professional planner, we do virtual one-on-one planning where we schedule Zoom calls. We help create a timeline. We go over your floor plan. We'll help with music.
We got a lead today from a bride. She said, well, my sister's my planner, but we don't know what we're doing. And I was like,
yeah, okay, it was perfect.
They were like, she's doing it, but we don't know her. I'm like, okay,
yeah, so we're going to help. Yeah, guide her through that process. The other thing is that we're working with Timeline Genius, and Timeline Genius is a software that creates professional timelines and is now available to couples. So you can not only have us there to guide you in creating the timeline, but then you end up having this timeline that everyone can follow. So it's really user friendly. We appreciate y'all so much and love our listeners and our followers. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram. You can watch this episode on YouTube or listen to it wherever you podcast.
So now I have to say the other thing. You were all up on me about saying something I've said before. We say this at the end of every podcast.
Go ahead.
It's a very personal day, y'all. That's Texas talk.
Y'all.
Put that in there, y'all. Don't let somebody talk you into something you don't want to do or talk you out of something you have your heart set on. It's your day.
You do you. Happy wedding planning, y'all. We'll end with a kiss. Mwah.
Bye. Hey, so thanks for listening to our podcast. If you found any of this information helpful and you know somebody who may be engaged or is a maid of honor, maybe you could tell them and share it with a friend.
Absolutely. So screenshot this episode, share it on Instagram, on Facebook, and tag the wedding duo. We promise to share the love back. Also, if you are interested in more resources or the show notes, you can go to theweddingduo.co. We have one-on-one virtual sessions, a shop, all sorts of fun stuff. Check it out.